Welcome back to Radio Row, Las Vegas. I'm Craig Hoffman here on The Hoffman Show, the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app and live on YouTube at the Team 980. Joining us now on set, Michael Lombardi, former NFL executive and author of the new book called Setting the Record Straight on the coaches, players, and history of the NFL. Football done right is the idea. And Michael, that is, you're a good person to talk to right now because we in Washington, D.C. have a football team that is essentially starting over. Yeah. I'm curious, just first of all, like, how well do you know Adam Peters, and what do you make of that hire and the task that he has ahead of him?
I don't know Adam at all, and I don't know, I know Dan Quinn. I don't know kind of how the setup that they have, to me, is always challenging because the NFL has never been about the general manager picking the play, running the team, and the coach coaching the team. That dynamic really is hard. Usually you want to have a coach kind of running the organization from how we're developing players and building. But look, Josh Harris, this is what he's done in basketball. I think this is what he's comfortable with. He wants to build around Adam Peters. There's a basketball model. Obviously, they brought in, the Bob Myers to help with this. So, they're going to try their way and see where it goes.
I think it's interesting when their press conference the other day, they talked so much about collaboration. In your experience, like what does good collaboration look like? And then what do, I would say, bad attempts at collaboration that turned into power struggles look like?
Well, collaboration's a really good word, right? It sounds really good. So the idea is we're going to get a lot of smart people in a room and we're going to make smart decisions. The problem is not all the smart people in a room are equally informed. Like, there is an expertise to the decision, and for me, I've been from the model of a pyramid where where information flows upward, and somebody who has the highest level of intellect makes a decision. Now, maybe that might be Peters, I don't know, but this idea that everybody's going to be collaborative in effort. You're in Washington, right? When you walk around the city of Washington, D.C., have you ever seen a monument dedicated to a committee?
I do not believe that there are any committee. I'm trying to think. There's got to be one somewhere.
No, there's no monument dedicated to committee.
Certainly not one of the big ones.
So collaboration is about committees. And sometimes in the NFL, you think you're being collaborative, when in reality, people are just telling you what you want to hear.
So let me just get straight to the point then. Do you not like this setup? Because I feel like most people in D.C. are psyched, and also we're coming out of 25 years of hell under the Snyder administration. But, do you not like the way that they're presenting this?
Well, I said I was going to give it an opportunity. I think if you study the NFL like I have, and you've worked for Bill Walsh, who didn't have this dynamic, if you work for Al Davis, who didn't have this dynamic, if you work for Bill Belichick, who didn't have this dynamic, if you understand the two teams playing in the Super Bowl today here in Las Vegas, they don't have this dynamic, you kind of have a sense that, okay, maybe this isn't the way to go. But Josh Harris has done this at the 76ers. I'm a 76er fan. I'm fully aware of how he operates his franchise. So if he feels it's worked for him with the Sixers, and then with whether it was Sam Hinkie being collaborative on what he wanted to do, whether it was Brian Colangelo being collaborative, whether it's Daryl Morey, then good for him.
Michael Lombardi with us here on Radio Row. What do you think Peters takes from San Francisco then? Because obviously he's been a part of one of the teams that is here. I would have to think that there is, even if there's an idea of collaboration, maybe that definition is shifted to whatever he's done.
They collaborated when they traded up for Trey Lance. I think Kyle wanted to draft Mac Jones, and they wanted to draft Trey Lance, Lynch and Peters, and they collaborated and got the Lance pick done. So I think, look, he hired Dan Quinn, who runs the 49ers system of defense, so he's very familiar with that, and that'll lend himself. And then he hired a very good coach in Cliff Kingsbury that can handle some things. So I think, look, it's one of those where, they're all going to have to come together, and everybody's going to have to get on the same page. But let's be clear, somebody's got to make the final decision.
Yeah. You mentioned Cliff. Did you cross with him in New England back in the day when he was a player?
I've known Cliff for almost my whole career, yeah. I think you have to separate two things. Like, Cliff is a head coach and Cliff is an offensive mind, right? Cliff's really good as a football coach. Maybe he isn't the best head coach in terms of defense, but he's really a good offensive coach, and he'll get the quarterback to play at a higher level. Plus, he understands what you have to do to win. I think one of the big things in Washington last year is you had a really bad offensive line. you had a very young quarterback, and you had an offensive coordinator who wanted to just call nothing but passes. And I said this from the beginning of the year. It was really one of the worst attention to detail jobs that you'll ever see in the league, because Eric didn't care about protecting the quarterback. He cared about calling pass plays.
Yeah, huge gripe on this show and many others. How adaptable do you feel like Cliff is to these top three quarterbacks? Obviously, May has run a version of an air raid system.
I think it's going to be Lance's decision. I think Lance is going to make the call. I think Peters is going to make the call. I mean, that's what he's there for.
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking, though, is like if Adam is talking to Cliff and talking to Dan and they eventually come to a decision.
You didn't hire Adam to basically make this decision on what Cliff thinks. If you're Josh
I understand that.
If you're
I'm
Josh
saying
Harris,
he's got
be able to do that.
He's got three quarterbacks that are seen. You know Cliff very well. I'm asking, no matter who Adam thinks is best, how adaptable is Cliff to be able to ultimately use that player?
I think Cliff's really adaptable. I think Cliff's a football coach. And whomever you give him will be a good player for Cliff. I mean, he's made Kyler Murray a better player than we've seen Kyler be. So, yeah, I think he's very adaptable.
What would you say are like the core principles for Cliff?
I think Cliff wants to spread the field. I think Cliff wants to get rid of the ball quickly. He wants to protect the quarterback. I think he understands that he has to have some balance and run the ball. I think he is truly a guy that makes the game easier for the quarterback with every single rep he takes.
I always ask this when people write books, totally shifting gears now. Why a book is such a monumental undertaking? Why did you want to write a book?
Well, it's my second book. I wanted to write a book about the history of the league. I don't think we pay enough attention to it. This game here, we're in Las Vegas, and this game is really the Bill Walsh game, because both offenses started with Bill Walsh from the 49ers. Both of them are in the West Coast offense. And Walsh is one of the foundational coaching trees that I write about in Football Done Right. It's about how do we build a team, how do we run an offense that takes advantage of the skill players and the offensive weapons that we have. So this game is really symbolic of the greatness of a man.
What in Kyle and Andy's offenses do you see as the core tenets that started from Bill, and then where have, through the many generations of evolutions that lead us to today, where have they veered off from that original?
It's all a rhythm passing game, right? So it's all about timing and rhythm. Walsh believed the quarterback was like a boxer. It was rhythm with his feet to throw the football. That hasn't changed. I think what they've done here is they've gone back to it, right? So they've gone back to this offensive mindset in Kansas City where more rhythm. Mahomes was holding the ball really earlier in the year. Since the Cincinnati game after the Christmas Day game, they've gotten rid of the ball and they've done a really good job with it.
Is there someone that you see as the defensive Bill Walsh?
Well, yeah, I think when you look at the guys that do a good job of adjusting their game plan every week to specifically attack their opponent, I think Mike McDonald did a great job of that. Guy only gave up 20 points in the playoff games, even though his team didn't advance. So I think Spagnuolo does a good job with that. When you say Walsh, what you're saying is he's a divergent thinker. He solves problems in a different way.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of good coaches like that. I think, that's one of Belichick's greatest strengths.
Do you think that the nature of – actually, this is an interesting thing, I think, for someone like you, because this came up a lot during the coaching search, is this idea of hiring an offensive versus a defensive coach. In your experience in studying the history of the league like you have, do you think that those two coaches, those two coaching archetypes, think differently about football?
They do. I think that the number one thing you have to hire is the best leader, because football is about leadership. And as much as we want to get into the strategy, the X's and O's of the game, which is the tactical part, you need somebody who understands the strategy of the game. I think that's really critical. How to set up a game. What Adam Peters wants to be able to do is bring an identity to Washington, to be able to say these are the kind of players that play here no matter who the coach is. That's how you have sustainable success.
Right.
When you're constantly changing and you're dependent upon who's the coordinator, who's the defense, it becomes much harder.
The book available now?
Available now. Football Done Right, wherever you get books.
There you go. That's Michael Lombardi, former NFL executive. Go check out the book, and you can read a lot more about everything we just talked about. Michael, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Right now, live with you from Radio Row in Las Vegas, I want to react to our last guest, Michael Lombardi, who had some pretty strong thoughts. That was interesting. I don't know Michael. We haven't had him on the show. This is the nature of Radio Row. He sits down. I ask, you're a front office guy. Let me ask you about the front office. And he immediately is like, don't like it. Coach-centric model's the way to go. And I'm sure that if you are a listener who is a Commanders fan, you have a fairly violent reaction to anything that is suggested Coach-Centric, because that word has been poisoned thanks to the last 4 years, and with good reason, because I'm just going to be blunt with you. I vehemently disagree with Lombardi, but also think that Lombardi, because he covers the entire league and is writing a book and doing all the other things, I don't think he really understands the setup here. I don't think he actually understands what Adam Peters is trying to do and how this works. So Lombardi, to make sure I don't put words in his mouth, he talks about how we have this, you want the coach to be the most important person and drive the organization. And I think that is true. But that doesn't mean it's coach-centric. It doesn't mean that he's got to have the most power. Because at the end of the day, I think what Josh Harris said at his introductory press conference is very true and is ultimately true, that the GM job is an 80-hour-a-week job. The head coach job is an 80-hour-a-week job. And they are different jobs. They are jobs that require your full attention. And if you are someone who is coaching a football team all fall long, you simply cannot have the scouting eye that a general manager can have. And you're also going to have your biases and things compared to what you normally watch, compared to, which sometimes, by the way, is good. I think good organizations use the fact that, hey, we have this group of scouts and coaches who only watches pro tape 11 months out of the year, and let's take 1 month to have them watch college tape and see who stands out to them. But I think that the larger point here is that they need to work together and with the coach setting how the team is going to play. It's not that a general manager is establishing play style, is establishing scheme, is establishing any of those things. It's that he is going to find players who fit in what the coach wants. And I'm going to swerve to come back. We're going to take a small detour and come back. It is very common in European soccer to have what they call a director of sporting, which is kind of a general manager. And that person will actually dictate how a team plays. And the reason for that is actually very smart, because in especially the lower levels, if you're not Manchester United, if you're not Man City, if you're not Arsenal, if you're not Liverpool, if you're not Inter Milan, the clubs that if you play the video game formerly known as FIFA have 5 stars, like if you're good, your coach is getting poached. Your best players are getting poached. So having someone who is committed to the organization that is dictating continuity is really valuable. That's not how it works in the NFL. The NFL, you want the best coach available, and if that means you had a 3-4 and you're going to a 4-3, or you were a team that ran a ton under center and now you want to hire a coach that spread, you can remake the roster fast enough that you don't be like, oh, we need continuity, even if it means a year of pain because some of the players don't fit. And so what I think is actually happening here, what I think is ultimately going to make this work, and the reason why I have confidence that it is going to work, is because I think Adam Peters understands that. Like, he comes from San Francisco. We don't think that, like, does he have any qualms that the most important person in the organization is Kyle Shanahan? Of course not. And what they've been able to do, and Peters was an enormous part of this, if not the biggest part. All due respect to John Lynch. But, like, if you listen to the people in the scouting community, like, Peters is as respected as anybody because he took what Kyle wanted. He didn't say, this is what I want. He took what Kyle wanted and said, and was able to say, like, this guy's what you want. Or in reverse, like, hey, here's this Deebo Samuel guy I really like. I don't know if this is exactly how it went with Deebo, but like these are the two paths that they've traveled in San Francisco. Is, hey, Deebo does X, Y, and Z. Does that fit for you? Like, do you have a plan for him? The best example of this recently is this video that went viral of Les Snead, the Rams GM, talking to Sean McVay about Puka Nacua, who we saw walking around earlier in a very nice Letterman jacket and some Travis Scott Nikes. So that's good job, Puka. Anyway, basically it was like, he doesn't do this, but he does this, this, and this extremely well. And Sean was like, I know exactly what to do with that guy. They take him and he sets the rookie receiving record. It wasn't that Les Snead was like, oh, we have to draft Puka Nacua. I'm the GM, GTFO, McVay. It was like, hey, I kind of like this guy. He's got some limitations. What do you think? Oh, McVay, I know what to do with him. Let's take him. That's how that works. So the idea that it is GM versus coach or whatever centric is just not, like, it's not a reality. It does have to be a collaboration. It does have to be each guy doing his job to an extremely high level. The GM can't coach the team, but the coach can't be your best scout either. They've got to be good at using information that the scouts give them. They've got to make sure that there's an understanding of how the talents cross. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the GM being able to GM and lead a scouting department and help set a path and the resources, making sure that the resources available for player development, and the coach coaching the football team. That's all it means. And I will also say this, like, if you think the coach-centric model works where the coach has all the power, like, you're just not paying attention to the NFL, which is pretty crazy for someone who wrote a book who is trying to describe the history of the NFL. Belichick, the last decade has been bad for him in player development and a scouting standpoint. Brady saved his butt for the first half decade. They've been terrible for the last half decade because they haven't drafted a player that got into a second contract in New England since 2013. That's just the reality of the situation. Pete Carroll and John Schneider's relationship, yes, Pete technically had all the power, but he also deferred to Schneider most of the time. And to the point that Schneider mentioned that in the post-game press conference after the Pete Carroll was let go. So I just think that the reality of the situation is that there isn't an example of a good coach-centric model. What there are plenty of good examples of, and this is where I wonder if this is just a matter of semantics, is you have plenty of examples where the coach sets a vision, the GM executes it, but they rely on the fact that the GM is the expert at his job and the coach is the expert at his job, and that is what wins in the NFL and, frankly, in any organization, in any business where people do their jobs well and actually respect the boundaries of said jobs.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.